Hey everybody, this is Richard from Truck Policy, and you're listening to the Road Report. A lot moved in trucking this week, so let's break it down and get you caught up. This week felt like things were starting to shift again. Not a full turnaround, but you can see pieces moving. Right up front, there are three things that drivers really need to know. Fuel is back over $5 in a lot of places, and that's putting pressure right back on margins. Overdrive says it's already changing how most owner-operators are thinking about this year. At the same time, lawmakers are pushing new rules around CDLs and driver qualifications. Landline reports that this is picking up speed in multiple states and in Congress. And on the freight side, capacity is tightening up a bit. FreightWaves data shows more loads getting rejected, which usually means rates are trying to move. Let's get into the details of these three. The first big one this week is fuel and owner-operator pressure. Overdrive is reporting that diesel prices have pushed past $5 a gallon nationally, with even higher prices out west. That's happening right as many owner-operators were starting to see a little improvement in the miles and income. The problem is, higher fuel eats up those gains pretty fast. ATBS data shows that fuel economy and cost control will determine who actually makes money this year. Even with freight showing small signs of life, expenses are still heavy across the board. Insurance, maintenance, and equipment are all still up there too. So even if rates tick up, it doesn't mean take-home pay follows. What this means for drivers is pretty simple. You can be busier and still not better off. And it feels like one of those times where running harder doesn't always mean getting ahead. What to watch next is whether fuel holds here or we keep climbing into April. The second big story is the push on CDL rules and enforcement. This is a pretty big one. Landline reports that a bill known as Delilah's Law is moving forward in Congress, aiming to tighten CDL standards nationwide. At the same time, multiple states are stepping up enforcement around English proficiency and language status requirements for all drivers. This isn't just talk either. States are actively increasing checks and putting more pressure on compliance. The goal, according to lawmakers, is that safety and consistency across the industry, but it also means more scrutiny on drivers and carriers, and it could tighten the driver pool depending on how far this goes. For drivers, this could mean longer inspections and fewer drivers on the road over time. You can see where this is heading. More rules, more checks, less gray area. What to watch next is how aggressive enforcement gets and how fast states follow through. So the third big story this past week is freight starting to tighten, but unevenly. FreightWaves data shows tender rejection rates climbing, especially in the Midwest. This means carriers are saying no more often, which usually signals improving conditions. At the same time, capacity is still leaving the market as smaller carriers exit. That's helping balance things out after a long stretch of oversupply, but it's not even across the country. The Midwest is tighter, while the West Coast is still softer. Seasonal demand is also kicking in, especially with the produce season starting down south. For drivers, this means better opportunities in certain lanes, but not everywhere. This is one of those patchwork markets where location matters more than ever. So what do we watch next? It's whether rejection rates keep climbing into April, really. So let's run through a few more headlines to kind of get you guys up to speed if you haven't been paying attention. Cargo theft is getting more attention again. Landline reports that Michigan lawmakers are pushing stricter penalties to slow it down. For drivers, that means more focus on secure parking and load tracking. Watch for more states jumping into this. Indiana is looking at tolling I-70. Landline says trucks could be paying over $80 on that stretch if it moves forward. That's a direct hit to operating costs. Watch for federal approval decisions on this one. Congestion pricing is sticking in New York. Landline reports that another legal challenge failed, so higher tolls are staying in place. If you run that area, this isn't going away. Watch for other cities looking at similar systems there. Colorado is cracking down on speeding trucks. Landline says tickets are at a 5-year high and enforcement is ramping up. That means more patrols and less tolerance. Watch for other states doing the same. Automated trucks are still expanding. Landline reports that more testing on I-70 in real weather conditions. This isn't just desert testing anymore. Watch how these pilots perform in the Midwest conditions. There's also movement on major highway bill. Landline says Congress is aiming to meet the September deadline. That bill will shape funding, infrastructure, and possibly more regulations. Watch how trucking priorities show up in it. And finally, emergency declarations are still popping up. Landline reports wildfire-related relief, allowing flexibility for drivers in affected areas. That can mean HOS relief depending on the location. Watch for regional changes as the weather events hit. Let's talk safety for a moment. With fuel high and enforcement picking up, this is a week to tighten things up. First, slow it down where the limits drop. States are clearly watching speed right now, and they're only going to get more strict. Second, double check your paperwork and logs. With CDL enforcement on the rise, clean records matter more than ever. Third, plan fuel stops in advance. Small price differences add up fast at these levels. Nothing complicated, just staying sharp on the basics. Over in the driver's seat, let's talk about what drivers are talking about on social. So one driver over on Our Truckers said fuel prices just wiped out his best week in months. He ran harder and still came out about the same. That's a reality right now. Another driver over on Facebook, Facebook group said inspections in his area are getting longer and more detailed. He mentioned more questions about paperwork and where he's been, what he's been doing than usual. That lines up with what we're seeing as well. A driver on TikTok was talking about finally being able to turn down cheap loads again in the Midwest. So it's the first time in a while he's felt like he has a choice. That's a shift worth watching. And then another guy over on Our Truckers said tolls are starting to feel like a second fuel bill to him, especially running the Northeast lanes. It's definitely hard to argue with those. For the final mile this week, here's the numbers to keep in mind. Diesel just crossed $5 per gallon nationwide. That's the kind of number that changes decisions fast. The takeaway this week is simple. Freight might be improving, but costs are still in control. That's the final mile. Thanks for riding along with the Road Report.